Hi, join us in the chat on YouTube. We know that you're on YouTube because you're watching us. Brooke and Randy and Matthew is here. I'm back.
Welcome back.
Thanks. Yeah, I was at the sleep doctor yesterday.
And how did that go?
Oh, it went well. So, kids, I found something out about myself. And so I always take with a grain of salt, like when I'm out talking to people and they say, hey, you're a legend. And I'm not a legend. Jack Buckle's a legend. That's I've talked about sports for a long time, but I say, no, there are legends, it's not me. But yesterday I go to the sleep doctor and he tells me that I have legendary sleep apnea. So apparently, like if you have bad apnea, it's like 10 or 15 apneas an hour.
Yeah.
I have like 108 or 118, something like that.
That sounds dangerous.
It sounded like that. So yeah, I'm going to try to get some sort of relief for my sleep apnea that apparently keeps me up and makes me tired.
Are you going into the Sleep Apnea Hall of Fame at this point?
That's what I'm hoping. As long as that's not just a posthumous honor for everybody that goes in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there you go. That's why I was out yesterday.
Yes, legendary sleep apnea.
Yeah.
Hopefully you get that fixed. That's very important.
Oh yeah. So I'm going back. I'm going to do a home sleep test next week. And by the way, if you're tired all the time, they talk about sleep apnea on commercials and stuff. Get it checked out. You might as well. We've got the line open. So if you'd like to join us on the chat, we'd love to have. What's wrong, Matthew? Matthew, put the bubble up and tell us what the hell's going on.
Yeah. What's happening?
He's upset about something. He's not putting up a chat thing that says good morning. Oh, the Moyer on. Oh, the Moyer. That's a Grand Canyon University. That's GCU. That's the Lopes.
The Lopes.
Yeah. It's not what's a Moyer?
Yeah. What's a Moyer? I don't even know what a Moyer is.
Go Lopes.
I believe he is referring to the effect that your shirt is having on screen. On your guys' camera here in front of you guys, you don't see it, but on the YouTube, Randy, your pullover is going insane.
Really?
It's screwing with the camera.
Yeah,
it's actually super distracting. I might actually make you take that off later on in the show.
No, don't do it.
It's fine. Wow.
It's fun.
Okay, we learned a new word today. That's what we do here at Sports Hub SCL on the Randy Karraker Show, is that we try to teach you new things, even new words that we didn't know about.
No, we know what a Moyer is.
So
I don't know what Moyer is.
Moyer is a
Okay.
pattern, a silk fabric that has been subjected to heat and pressure rollers after weaving it to give a ripped appearance.
It's also a former pitcher for the Mariners and the Phillies, Moyer.
Why the hell are you wearing GCU stuff?
It's random.
I've got a friend, and Nancy Renee just checked in.
Oh, hi, Nancy.
Hi, Nancy. So she says Lopes up.
Oh.
Yeah, GCU is a good program, man. That's Bryce Drew.
Nice.
He's got them going. They're good. They made the NCAA tournament the last couple of years. They're good, man.
I hate GCU so much.
Nancy,
no.
It has zero to do with them robbing the Billikens of a game earlier this year in one of the most frustrating games I've ever watched in my entire life. It has nothing to do with that.
Okay, good.
It has the entirety to do with them being them. What's the word here?
Turning good.
No,
Improving?
them tainting college basketball.
Oh,
as with the way that the university is, a university. I'm using quotes up here. And the profit stuff that's been, the fact that they're for profit now, and it's there's nothing I like about GCU, man.
They're nonprofit, man.
It's a beautiful. I mean, well, that's ask the federal government if that's true.
The IRS says they are.
I guess they are.
Well, who would determine that? The IRS.
I'm pretty sure. Didn't they just lose? Did they just win a court case? Or just lose a court? They just won a court case. They won the court case. Yeah, exactly.
Eli says, "Take it off, Randy."
I know what's going on.
LOL. Nancy says, "Lopes up." Nancy,
Coach Drew is amazing. I have nothing against Bryce Drew.
Nancy says, Coach Drew is amazing.
I have nothing against Bryce Drew. This all has to do with the actual organization.
Yeah, the shirt is kind of jumping around on there.
Yeah, let's talk sports here. Let's get to the Cardinals. They play split squads today. They have Washington, and I believe that game is on FanDuel. And then they have the Mets, and I think that game's on ESPN. So you'll be able to watch at noon both games, and then we'll have the post game on Cards Up 365 here later on today. So we're looking forward to that. But the Cardinals have some interesting battles going on for positions. We'll talk in future days about the center field battle,
yes,
which may or may not include Lars Nootbaar. Not sure
Maybe.
about that.
Yeah. It's very confusing about what's
Yeah.
happening there. Victor Scott II with
Mhm.
his runway and what he's doing, he's really taking
Yeah.
charge.
Right. And so we know right field is spoken for. We know first base is spoken for. We know shortstop and third base at the moment are spoken for. But we don't know whether or not, because of what happens with third base, we really don't know about second base.
Yeah, we really don't know about second base because you still have Nolan Arenado there.
Mhm.
So what exactly happens with Arenado still in camp? That just really changes
Right.
things up.
Because it could be Gorman, it could be Donovan. And
Yes.
if Gorman's at second, then that presents a left field battle between Lars Nootbaar and Brendan Donovan,
Donovan.
unless Lars Nootbaar is playing center field, which would be a three-way battle. But today we're talking about catching.
Mm-hmm.
And last year, Pedro Pages established himself as the Cardinals catcher because of his defensive prowess and because of his ability, Brooke, to manage games, to manage the catching, the pitching staff. The pitchers love throwing to him, and in large part because of the disparity between his defense and the defense that Ivan Herrera brought to the table, which included throwing out 6 of 59 attempted base stealers.
Yeah, throwing out runners seemed to be a huge issue for Herrera in general, and also just getting used to that defensive kind of prowess we're used to. We don't have Yadier Molina anymore.
We don't.
I think that we have to remind ourselves that, but I feel like fans are, for the most part, I would say the general fan is pretty rational, understanding that Yadier Molina is Yadi. Nobody else will be like him. Obviously, Wilson Contreras couldn't fill those shoes. Herrera and Pages, it takes multiple people to be able to fill Yadi's shoes. But at the same time, with Herrera, he obviously struggled defensively and maybe didn't have as strong of that connection with the pitchers like Pages was able to establish.
And here is an issue, because for several years, the Cardinals talked about how good Ivan Herrera was defensively.
He was supposed to be the next in line.
He was. And then all of a sudden he gets to the major leagues and he's not great at calling a game, and he's terrible at throwing out runners, and he's not great at blocking the plate. So defensively, he left an awful lot to be desired, which was interesting because when I first heard about him, the word was, okay, well, his defense is great and his bat needs to catch up. He gets here and he can hit.
Opposite.
Right. And he can't catch it all. So the Cardinals sent him down last year to work on his arm. But then he kind of took it upon himself after suffering the way he did defensively at the major league level to get himself fixed during the offseason.
And Pages, we just need to note too, he was great defensively, but then the bat wasn't fully there. So it's like if there was a way to just really mesh those two together, it'd make the perfect catcher, right? Where you would have that bat, you would have things pretty good defensively, but they didn't have that. It was a situation where Herrera had the bat, but not the defensive skill, but Pages had the defensive skill, not the bat.
And if players that the Cardinals bring up hit like they're supposed to hit, if Jordan Walker hits the way he's supposed to hit, if Lars Nootbaar hits the way he's supposed to hit, if Nolan Gorman hits the way he's supposed to hit, if the young players, Mason Wynn, who is 0 for 15 so far in spring training, if those people hit the way they're supposed to hit, then you can carry a catcher that can't hit.
Exactly.
But one time when Mike Matheny he struggled a lot defensively, Tony La Russa went to him and said, look, you don't have to have a hit all year. As long as you catch the way you catch, manage the pitching staff the way you do, keep winning Gold Gloves, we don't need you to hit. All we need you to do is catch. And that's the way it should be, unless you have a great offensive and defensive catcher, as Yadi became. But the Cardinals don't have the ability now to carry that deficient offense. And because of the lack of production of the aforementioned players, they needed Ivan Herrera to turn into a better defender.
And when you were talking about this offseason, the work that Herrera put in, we were talking to Mike Claiborne yesterday, Cardinals broadcaster for nearly 20 years, and also as a part of our Sports Hub SCL family here. He was talking about the progression that Herrera has actually made this offseason, and I thought it was really intriguing. We have that clip from yesterday here too. What have you seen from the young catchers with Pages and Herrera during the spring training?
Well, Pages is Pages. He's lost a little weight. He's still one of the best catchers we have in the organization. Well, he is the best catcher right now. He's still trying to figure out the offense. Catching, everybody likes throwing to him. He really understands the strike zone. He's a very good communicator. Herrera, I think, has improved his catching skills. He picked a runner off of first base yesterday on a nice snap throw. He seems like he's more comfortable catching everyone. So from that standpoint, I think we're improved. It's still early, but what really kind of scratched my head was in talking to Herrera earlier in the spring, and he talked about going down to this place down the road called Driveline, works on your mechanics in different positions, a whole 9 yards. And he said he learned things in this one series of sessions with Driveline that he never knew in baseball. So my question is, how do you get this far when there's some certain things technically that you probably should have already been taught or should already know? So it's almost like he didn't get out of line to learn how to catch again, but he's taking some things that he's really absorbed and really tried to grow those things. And footwork was one of them. Trying to develop arm strength, and can his arm hold up for a whole year? Little things like that is what they're trying to do with him. But you can count on seeing him and his bat in the lineup on a regular basis.
And you want to see his bat in the lineup because that's what we talked about. There's a high offensive upside with him, and we've seen Herrera is great offensively. It's just, can he catch up defensively? And it's really interesting that it's Driveline that pointed out basically ways that he could improve as a catcher behind the plate. That's the part that I think that a lot of us would be looking at here is, wow, Herrera learned more at Driveline in one offseason than the entire time that he did in the minor league system with the Cardinals.
Well, there's a couple of troubling things here. Number one, until the Cardinals hired Ethan Goforth, they have not had a catching instructor at the minor league level since Mark DeJohn retired, which was 5 years ago, after the 21 season. So 22, 23, 24. So it's 3 seasons without a minor league catching instructor. And he wasn't even the minor league catching instructor. He was a guy that was a field coordinator. And then if you want to go back before that, Dave Ricketts, who passed away about a decade ago. So it's troubling that the Cardinals didn't have a catching instructor. As troubling for me, if you're one of those people that says, Yadi's got to be our manager. Yadier Molina was with Ivan Herrera for 3 years. Didn't teach him anything. He was with Carson Kelly for 3 years. Didn't teach him anything. He was with Andrew Kisner 3 or 4 years. Didn't teach him anything. And if you want Yadier Molina to take over a young team and teach them how to play, he's never taken it upon himself to help young players. Never. And I don't understand. Well, I do get it. Yadi's a hero in this town. He brought the Cardinals a lot of winning. But I think we all need to understand as fans that just because he was a great player didn't make him a great or willing teacher. And Exhibit A is Ivan Herrera. How can he not have or understand or have been taught footwork and throwing by Yadier Molina in the 3 years that they were together?
I did see Yadi, though, especially in those spring trainings when he was still a player here with the Cardinals. I mean, he would work with those young catchers. So spring training does go by really quickly. You have that kind of short time where you can maybe do specific drills with those catchers. But then you get into games and then it's into the season. So maybe it's just that there was such a short amount of time that Yadi could even work with these young catchers.
And maybe there was too much on his plate. As we know, the team has not succeeded since he left. But I sure saw Albert Pujols down in the dugout with the iPad talking to hitters a lot.
Can I say that I think the biggest issue here is that there hasn't been a catching instructor in the organization because Yadi was a player, so that should be his big focus, right? Is him being a player for the organization. And like I said, I did see him working during spring training with these young catchers, but the fact that the Cardinals until this season didn't have a catching instructor working with guys like Ivan Herrera in the minor leagues, I think is the bigger failure in this situation.
Unbelievable that the Cardinals went through life without a catching instructor, without an outfield instructor, without an infield instructor, without a base running instructor at the minor league level. It's unbelievable that a Major League Baseball franchise would let their minor league system get away from them as much as the Cardinals did.
So wouldn't you say that it's more on the Cardinals organization, which they said this offseason, basically that they did not put enough into their development, that they actually took a step back, and that's why they're putting that re-emphasis on development in their minor league system, that it's actually on the Cardinals more than Yadi for failing these young catchers?
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
But my question is, there's no question. But my question would be, for example, when Mike Matheny was replaced in 2004 by Yadier Molina, Matheny was working with him every day to try to get the young catcher to be better, to be all about the team and to pay it forward. And I think every established player should do that. I do find it interesting that a guy like Herrera told Mike Claiborne, yeah, I learned stuff that I never knew existed.
Yeah.
And I think that that's probably something that he should have learned from either the Cardinals
how did they
by
not
having an
see it? How
instructor.
did
We're hearing-
nobody see it?
or
is
the veteran catcher.
We're hearing phrases like that an awful lot lately.
Yeah.
Who's the blanking on the name? My apologies, but the former Cardinal was up in Milwaukee this year, and the quote just dropped from him, and he said, "Great organization, loved my time with the
pitcher.
Cardinals, but they're doing things here that are improving me as a player." Connor Thomas, thank you very much. That I never saw in St. Louis. I mean, they're using technologies, they're using coaching in a way that he never got in St. Louis, and the fact that we keep hearing that is becoming extremely problematic in my mind, and the fact that it's lining up with a lack of success in the regular season shouldn't surprise anyone. I did want to say really quickly, we have a poll right now up on the YouTube chat. Who should get more innings at catcher in 2025? Pedro Pages, Ivan Herrera, and I did add a third option that's just Crooks, because that's what I hear from the minor league people who are obsessed with him. And right now, Pedro Pages is actually winning this vote 50% to Ivan Herrera's 40%. And of course, Crooks bringing in 10%. I threw it out there for guys like Bill Downton, who threw it on the chat. If we were given a runway, then it could be Crooks. He threw out over 30% of runners. Jimmy Hutchins also in on the chat says, Jimmy Crooks is a very good catcher. He threw out a lot of runners in Springfield, and he has power. There's a lot of people who love the Jimmy Crooks, but this is a two-man battle, ladies and gentlemen.
Crooks, no doubt at the major league level. Jimmy Crooks was the Cardinals' minor league player of the year and has a chance to be really good. But talk to people in the organization, and they actually like Leonardo Bernal better than Crooks.
Yeah.
As a guy with major league upside.
And who is the catching instructor again? By
Ethan
the way?
Goforth is the
because we
gentleman's
were
name.
discussing this. We should.
Yeah.
I feel like we should introduce, because we were talking about they didn't have one in the past in the minor league system. They do have one now, so you do have Ethan now taking over.
Yep, he's the catching instructor. They have a guy named Matt Pierpont. Good hire away from the Seattle organization with all the young pitchers that they have brought up. He's another guy that has done well. To get Rob Serfolio, the minor league director from Cleveland in that organization. Nobody develops young players better than Cleveland does. I think Chaim Bloom has done a really good job, and there's been a real method to his madness in bringing people from organizations that do what the Cardinals need to have done. They come from organizations where they do it well.
And the biggest thing here is that Bloom is able to do what he wants in the minor league system, and that way he has a cohesive system and message going into the major league system, which he'll be taking over all the operations for next season once John Mozeliak steps away.
And you'd think that maybe you'd like to get like a whole year head start while the guys, while you're paying the guy to, get that culture started right now. But why not wait a year while he's already racked up a year plus of salary and actually hasn't had to been able to make his impact, known to the fan base or anything like that? Because it's not like the fan base could use a bit of confidence right now.
I didn't ask. I broached my idea to Chaim Bloom about what he's doing this year, and I finally got him to buy in. I said, you got to work with me here. But Chaim Bloom is not unlike Buck Showalter when he took over the Arizona Diamondbacks a couple of years before they got started, and he built the minor league system. He built the minor league infrastructure, hired all the minor league people, and then built literally from the ground up. You build a pyramid. And Chaim is doing that. He did it last year. He did it during the offseason. He's doing it now. He's building a minor league system like he did in Tampa to his specifications. Then when Mo retires at the end of the season, he'll take over a group that's probably better than a group that ordinarily would be put together by an expansion draft. But he'll take over a very young team, and let's be honest about this. He's going to be able to put his own stamp on the coaching staff and the manager at the major league level. I look at it as if Chaim Bloom this year is building the foundation of a franchise, of an expansion franchise. And it's not unlike what Showalter did in Arizona or what other people have done in building franchises. And I think that's where Bloom is right now. Just because he's not doing it at the major league level doesn't mean he's not doing anything.
Can I say just kind of an outside conspiracy, or maybe why we don't see Mozeliak really talk about Bloom that much? I know they had the press conference at the end of the year, but I think that maybe, do you think with Mozeliak it's a little bit tough for him? One, you bring in a different voice from outside of the organization, which is very rare for the Cardinals to do, that we've seen, especially in recent years during Mozeliak's tenure. But with Bloom, it's not necessarily going to be a continuation of what Mozeliak built here. It's a whole, as you mentioned, kind of expand. It's like an expansion team, basically. It's like restarting, basically, what they're looking to do there. So it's not a continuation of Mo's legacy of handing that baton over. Instead, it's somebody just kind of not doing what he did, basically, and starting their own legacy far away from what he did.
And it's philosophically far away.
Philosophical
those
differences.
two would have philosophical differences, because what Mo did was when they gave him, they put him in charge of the baseball organization, said you can either spend money on, they gave him enough to spend it either on the major league setup or the minor league setup. He spent it on the major league setup. Now the Cardinals have determined that no, we're going to spend it on the minor league setup. And I kind of think he's probably getting the blame for the Cardinals not being a good minor league system when he really didn't have the budget to build a good minor league system.
Mm-hmm.
But he also, to be fair, has not brought in anybody from the outside like Bloom has to help the Cardinals build the minor league system. He was the one who oversaw them. He would have to put his final stamp of approval on them not having a minor league catching instructor when 5 of your top 30 prospects are catchers and the other 2 are first-year catchers at the major league level. He would have to put his stamp on not having a minor league running instructor. He would have to put his stamp on losing a guy like Brent Strom and not replacing people like Mike Schilt and Ollie Marmol and Pop Warner and Stubby Clapp at the minor league level with competent people. Mo would have to be the one that would have to put his stamp of approval on those things. Chaim Bloom has been hired to get back to the Cardinal way. Now, is it going to be the Cardinal way? No, it's going to be the Tampa way.
That's what I was going to say. It seems very different than the Cardinal way.
So I can see how somebody's ego, who did have a lot of success in the first 2/3 of his run as the Cardinals general manager slash promo, I can see how somebody would be affected. And by the way, I think this is different than the Blues. I think that Doug Armstrong has handpicked his successor. I don't think Mo, like Armstrong picked Steen, I don't think that Mo picked Chaim Bloom.
Well, you can even see just in the way that when Mozeliak's asked specific questions about Chaim Bloom, or even, hey, when the trade deadline comes up, who's going to be a part of making that move? And he said, well, it's me. And then, whatever happens in the future, that's, for Bloom to deal with, basically. You could tell that there's just like a slight tension there is what I'm feeling.
Randy, we need to edit that. Can you do me a favor? Say the Tampa way again.
The Tampa way?
Dun, dun, dun. Because I think that's how St. Louis fans hear that statement.
The Tampa way.
And then the Jaws music starts building in the background.
Yeah.
Which is cheaper. They did say that they're reducing payroll. They're reducing payroll. They're putting an emphasis on the minor league system. It does sound like the Tampa way. You bring in the guy who was a big part of that. So it really is the Tampa way. I think that that's what a lot of people are looking to do anyways, is in Major League Baseball, because we've talked about how there's, the deep end and then kind of the kiddie pool that people are swimming in. Right now, it's just the Dodgers and the Mets and the Yankees that are in that deep end of the waters of how much money they can spend. Everybody else is just trying to build from within, not spend as much money to keep payroll down.
And the Diamondbacks are now the bellwether, although they have signed a couple of guys. Last year it didn't work out when they signed Jordan Montgomery, and now obviously they signed Corbin Burns. Bill Downton. So in 26, the infield will be Sajacy, Wynn, Weatherholt, Contreras. The outfield of Scott, Walker, and Whom. First of all,
sunshine, lollipops,
and
rainbows, everything.
I think a lot of it depends on what Lars Nootbaar does in 25. I think a lot of it depends on what Nolan Gorman does in 25.
Yeah.
And here's another part of it. Do you really think that after another year of decline, the Cardinals are going to find somebody interested in Nolan Arenado or a place that he'd be interested in going?
Trying to find that perfect match for them. They already tried with the Astros this offseason. Maybe that's not completely, I know we're talking about that later in the show. Maybe that's not completely off the table because of some of the moves that the Astros have been making, but it's like you have to find that perfect situation where somebody's going to be willing to take some of that payroll, which is a big part of why the Cardinals want to move him, and the right situation that Arenado wants to be in. So that's like a really small kind of window, it feels like.
Right. And then you have to think about the fact that you're paying him a lot of money in his ages 35 and 36 seasons when ordinarily players do decline. Scotty, hard to believe the organization said they were going to find out what kind of talent they had, and a journeyman outfield like Siani, I don't care if you think he's Willie Mays, be getting innings. And I don't know. I think that Michael Ciani is a superb defensive outfield. And if you think he's Willie Mays, then you give him an opportunity, right? I don't think that he is, by any stretch of the imagination, great offensively, but he is a somewhat serviceable player. Flute Players, 1978, $5. What's that mean?
Nice.
Well, here we go.
What does that mean?
I didn't know what that
Yes,
meant.
Randy's new to YouTube. Flute Player 1978. Thank you very much for your super chat there. Yeah, you pay a little bit of money and we read it immediately.
Okay. Pajes for catcher. Also, if the Blues sell at the deadline, they just told me they don't want my business the rest of the year. They are a point out. Okay, let's start with Pajes for catcher. Do you agree with that?
Yes,
I do too.
because of how well he works for the pitcher. But I do want to bring this up before we address the second part of this, because that does lead into our next segment where we're talking about the Blues trade deadline. But with Pajes and Herrera, in this situation where we're talking about kind of worrying about Herrera behind the plate, especially defensively, with the ABS system on the way, does that kind of change their approach about how they feel about catchers defensively?
It should, but the primary objective then of a catcher is going to be
And you
able
have
to throw
pitch
guys
counts
out.
now. Yeah.
You've got to be able to throw.
Yeah.
Right. You don't worry about framing anymore.
The bigger bases.
Yeah, but you worry about managing the pitching staff, calling the right pitches, and then the other thing is making sure that you have a guy that can throw.
Exactly.
I think that's important.
And then the other part of what Flute Players 1978 says is the Blues sell at the deadline. They just told me they don't want my business for the rest of the year. They are a point out. That's a tough one because they had that 4-game win streak going into Sunday. Then they lost to the Dallas Stars, fell apart in the third period. The PK is something that has been a big issue for the Blues that does concern me, that even with them being a point out, they're like one of the worst in the league when it comes to their PK unit currently.
They were awful on Sunday night.
Yes,
right? It was terrible. They had a nice little run there, and then they were awful on Sunday night. To your point, though, and here's the way I'm looking at this. If they trade Braden Schenn, there's nobody in that room that a young player that's either here, a guy like Neighbors, a guy like Bolduc, even a guy like Robert Thomas, who's not a young player anymore in his 7th year, but there's not a player in that room that those guys look to and say, okay, that's how a pro operates. That's how we wind up being a winning player. I don't think there's a single guy in there aside from Braden Schenn that does it. My concern would be if you do that, then all of a sudden you've got kind of a rudderless ship in terms of leadership. And if you say, okay, we're going to check out this year, when do you stop becoming the Blackhawks?
Yeah.
You know, if you say, okay, we're going to get rid of our veterans, it's going to be all kids. Then
That's
then you get
the
into
situation.
that vicious circle. You look at what Chicago did this year, signing a bunch of
and they even set it up where they would get Bedard and they still are struggling.
Right.
You like what I said there because that's the big conspiracy theory that they were setting it up for them to get it. They basically did.
And it's still not working. So my concern is if you don't have Schenn, and I don't think that Schenn, the player, is going to be worth the salary that he's due for the next 2 years after this year. But I think Schenn, the leader, is going to be worth every penny.
Really quickly, I know
it's worth paying for.
Next segment, we're going to be diving more into these deadline rumors, but we are getting some chats here still talking about, we've kind of shifted over to the other battle brewing in Jupiter that we alluded to. Mike Claiborne directly mentioning the little boost from Victor Scott II. They talked about it yesterday on Cards 365. You can jump into that. We're going to be breaking down center field a little bit tomorrow, but while we're getting the chats, we got to read them. So Space says, Ciani will extremely likely to earn gold gloves over the course of his career. Still like Scott over him because I think he has a higher ceiling, and especially after Ludwig, got to that swing of his.
What you have to look at is ultimately who has the higher offensive upside. Scott is every bit the center fielder that Ciani is.
Yeah.
So
and
for
he's
me,
the future.
Right. So that's what I'm looking at. And Michael Ciani, by the way, if you have to get into a situation where Jordan Walker doesn't improve substantially, and you get to the 7th inning with a lead, you put Ciani in center, Scott in left, Nootbaar in right, and that way you can lock down defense in the last couple of innings. So there is a place for Michael Ciani on this team, and he's not making a bunch of money. So I don't have any problem with him being the 4th outfielder and a defensive replacement.
I think that's what he should be. I think the biggest thing, though, is that it just feels like Oli Marmol, that's his guy, is Ciani.
Well, I'm not speaking out of school here. When I asked Ollie one time last year down the stretch, I said, "Who's got the higher upside, Siani or Scott?" And he was pretty adamant that he thought Siani had passed Scott in terms of having offensive upside.
Yeah, but then you look at the spring training, and I know that we can't be fooled by everything in spring training. It's actually Siani who struggled offensively during spring training.
Right, and Scott has been good.
Yeah, exactly. So now we have to talk about our Cards Hub 365 that you were mentioning earlier, Rockio.
And we have Cards Hub 365 after 2 games today. So you've got the Cardinals and the Nationals, you've got the Cardinals and the Mets, and you'll have the opportunity to react to those games about 3 o'clock after they're over. Who do we have today on the Cards Hub programs? Is Brendan Schaefer part of it today? Brendan and Joe still? Okay, so
Nice.
You'll be able to tune in to Cards Hub 365. That'll be awesome this afternoon as they review 2 games, and we'll have a lot of players to discuss.
Yes, a lot. And then going into tomorrow too. Now,
Right here on Sports Hub STL.
I'm really bad at remembering things I read. So it's Joe Roderick and Mike Claiborne.
Oh, okay. Joe Roderick.
Split squad
Okay, I
Cards
like
Hub
this.
365 on this one because they got a split squad game going today. Also, we're cooking some extra things up here in the studio that you're going to be seeing on Sports Hub STL pretty soon.
nice.
Just a little teaser there for everybody.
Okay, so we were talking about the Blues trade deadline earlier. Now we can actually get into that a little bit more because, as that person mentioned earlier, do you still have that tweet up? Can you bring it up again from Flute Players in 1978? So he said, pies for catcher, also the Blues sell at the deadline. They just told me they don't want my business the rest of the year. They are a point out. So we're in the situation where they have really played well coming out of 4 Nations. I mean, they've been on a surge. We talked about it. It's like they couldn't string together 3 wins the entire season. Now they come out of 4 Nations with the trade deadline just really kind of breathing down their necks where they know, hey, guys could be moved here soon. They're playing really well. You're having all these different guys step up. Your top line's performing well of Thomas, Buchnevich, and Neighbors. Everybody seems to be coming together. But even with them being a point out in this wild card situation, it seems like maybe – do you judge it on what they've already been prior to this 4 Nations run, or do you judge it by what you've seen here recently?
I would go by what I've seen more recently, because that was the first really significant time that Montgomery had to spend with his team and practice and implement a system. And they're clearly playing within the scope of a system right now, which Buchnevich is playing a lot better than he did before.
And you
4
wonder
Nations.
if health has anything to do with that too, because we know that Thomas has been dealing with like a nagging ankle injury. So you wonder if health has a lot to do with that. And we actually have from Sunday with our Blues Hub weekly show, Jamal Mayers, I asked him about this specifically about the trade deadline, if Doug Armstrong and Alexander Steen, because he's a part of this, if his mind has changed with this recent play. For Jamal, especially with the Blues and the way that they have been playing here lately. Just one more thing I want to touch on, because of course a lot of people are watching the wild card standings right now for the Blues, and they really needed those 2 points tonight for that wild card spot. What does this mean for their playoff standings now moving forward?
Well, it certainly doesn't help, but again, the tendency is, because they have played well going into the break and coming out of it, played extremely well. The tendency is, are we going to judge this group on the 5-game, 6-game sample size of late? And does that detour management's decisions, what they've been thinking for the last month and a half? And to me, the team decided a month ago what the plan was for trade deadline. As excited as we must be as fans, yes, they're close. Yeah, they have to jump 3 teams to get to that wild card. I would temper your excitement, because sometimes you just got to rip the Band-Aid off. Sometimes you just got to say, you know what? What's the real sample size for this Blues team? Has it been the last 50 some odd games, or has it been the last 6 games? And I think management has a really good handle on where they are. I don't think, if I'm being honest, I don't think this recent success, this 5-game sample, will change their view and their plan going forward heading into the trade deadline.
And that's really interesting, because they have been playing well. It seems like they do want to play for each other, but do you ignore how that they've been playing prior to that? That's the situation that the Blues are in currently. And it's interesting because we've seen all those trade rumors. I mean, it feels like every single day I'm seeing a new article, aren't you, about Braden Schenn possibly being moved? But yesterday, TSN hockey insider Darren Drager said 1 point behind the Vancouver Canucks in the West. They have 21 games remaining, and Doug Armstrong and the Blues have said all along, we don't have to trade our captain. He's under contract here. Maybe they will revisit in the offseason.
And I think that's the approach the Blues should take. And all due respect to Jamal Mayers, but you can't look, because you made a coaching change, at the entirety of the first part of the season.
That's a good point.
Because the team is different now than it was before Jim Montgomery took over. And how many times do we see teams that are wild card teams that wind up having a level of success? And I think it'd be valuable not only from a financial standpoint for the Blues to get a couple of home games in the playoffs, but I think it'd be valuable for this group of young players to play in big games, because most of them have not. They haven't made the playoffs in the last couple of years. At some point, you're going to have to get that experience. And I think that with Montgomery at the helm, with Jordan Binnington as your goalie, with the veteran defense, it's another part of it. You didn't have Cam Fowler all year long. Parayko's playing better than he ever has right now. I think there are a lot of positive. Bolduc is playing better than he has. We've seen improvement from Buchnevich. I think there are so many positives over these last 6 games, and really over the last 15 games, that I'm more inclined to look at the smaller sample size with this particular group.
Andy says, as a fan, I don't want to see anyone traded, but I would certainly understand why you would want to trade Benner/Schenn now, as their value is high. Their value is high.
Mm-hmm. Their value
and Parayko
high,
too.
but,
we could add Parayko to that discussion.
Yeah, but here's the question: do you want to? So you're going down to basically ground zero. If you trade those 3 players, your captain, your best defenseman, and your goalie, you're headed towards Blackhawks or Sharks territory. You're giving up, and I don't know that Blues fans have the appetite to pay the price for tickets to see a team that finishes at the bottom of the division every year.
Yeah, especially with them being so close. It's tough because I do understand. Now, it is important to note the no trade clauses are a big factor here too. So just because maybe they would be looking to move a Braden Schenn, which is the one that we're seeing over and over again with these trade rumors, it would have to be something that would make sense for him too, not just the Blues. Like, I would assume I would want a lot back in return. I would think that the Maple Leafs is one that we see over and over again if his brother Luke, who's with the Nashville Predators right now, also moves.
Yeah. But if I'm the Blues, I want to keep that guy. I don't want to move Schenn. And like I said earlier, I think that his value goes beyond what he brings this particular team on the ice. And I think that for those of us that were around after the lockout, after the Blues traded Chris Pronger, that's miserable. That is awful.
What was that like?
Well, they were drawing 5,000 and 6,000 fans a game. And they got the number 1 pick in the draft. They got the number 4 pick in the draft. They took Petro with that. They took Eric Johnson with the number 1 pick. It's a bad scene. And people don't want to pay in this town for that sort of a product. And if you get rid of those guys, then you're in that territory where it's great to have high picks, but Arizona/Utah has had high picks for years. Now Chicago, Buffalo, San Jose, they've had high picks for years. And where are they?
Well, while we're here, I just need to ask about the context of the moment, because I wasn't a big hockey fan back then. So how much of the context of you end the longest playoff streak in professional sports, in American professional sports history, and then you have the lockout kill all the momentum the league had, and then you come back and you immediately suck for the first time in 3 decades. How much of that context added to those problems here in St. Louis that maybe that wouldn't be there, that context wouldn't be there for next year as much as it was in 04 or 05, whatever it was.
Well, perhaps the lockout had something to do with it. The biggest thing was that they traded Pronger.
Yeah.
And they would have won had they traded Pronger. And I think that's what, not that Braden Schenn is Chris Pronger, but he was the most important guy in your room. And pretty much inevitably, when you trade the most important guy in your room, your team does not react well. When you have Ryan Suter saying, I want to stay in St. Louis, and a big part of the reason I want to stay here is because of Braden Schenn's leadership, That's a lot. That says a lot.
And what does it also say to the guys too that you do start performing well? And we talked about it. Like Buchnevich hasn't been playing great. Thomas hadn't been playing great too, going into Four Nations. But honestly, that could have been more due to health than anything like that. So that top line, the way that they've been performing here recently, it's like these guys, they know that the trade deadline is around the corner. Maybe it's the perfect situation of health is catching up too, and that they have the ability to make sure they can show Army, we want to stay together.
And my guess would be that at some point during the Four Nations, or when practice started after the Four Nations, Marty went to Bucci and said, hey, I know how you can play. I've seen it, but I'm not seeing it right now. You're going to be a wing. Don't worry about being a center. You have your contract. Don't play tight because of your contract. Let's be the player that you're capable of being. Buchnevich is still the Blues' most gifted hockey player.
So skilled. Yeah.
And they just need to get more out of him. And if they do, then he's a guy that can carry you for a little while.
Scotty's text here. Suddenly everyone thinks they quote unquote have a shot. It's interesting to me because I got a text while I was in California during you guys were doing one of the shows. And it was from somebody on Twitter who said the Blues played their best game of the year last night. And Randy and Brooke spent the first part of the show talking about the Cardinals outfield. First of all, great segment on the Cardinals outfield. You guys, I went back and listened to it. It was a fantastic segment on the Cardinals outfield. I'm not sure why Neil was so angry. I gave him a very lippy response, and he didn't appreciate that. But my bottom line is that I told him, I'm like, listen, man, right now, every time the Blues win a big game, they immediately shoot themselves in the foot. Now, they did go on a 4-game win streak following that win. That was the first of a 4-game win streak. I was wrong, but to Scotty's point, every time they've put something together this year, we've gone, a little hope. And then immediately 1 week later, we're right back to blow it up. How do you prepare for next year? So on and so forth. So I'm with Scotty on this one. It does seem a little knee jerk that the finally they put it together one time and we say, oh, no, can't make the trades now.
Well, number one, I think that we need to quantify or qualify what a shot is. To me, I'm talking about a shot at the playoffs. I'm not talking about a shot at winning the Stanley Cup. But they're a different team since they came out of the break. And I've said all along, even before they hired Jim Montgomery, that Jim Montgomery is a difference-making coach. And the way I'm looking at it is he got them together on the Thursday, the Tuesday, actually, before the Four Nations ended, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for practice. And he was finally able to have a little mini training camp with them. And they are playing, I think I would argue with anybody that they're the same team they were before the break.
It does take time to your point too about Jim Montgomery taking over and that whole situation with Banny transitioning over to Montgomery is it does take time to fully implement what you want and the pace that you want this team to work at and just your coaching style.
Yeah.
So I do understand that part of it. But it's tough because then I do get Jamal's point too. And with what you're saying, Rocky, and what Scotty is saying too, is that we've seen in the past, I mean, Army, he is an open book at the end of the season, and he makes it really clear he knew the exact game, the exact situation where a team wasn't going to make the playoffs, and he knew it, regardless of what was happening after that, anything. He's made that really clear that he has a pretty good evaluation of what a team is. I mean, he knew with the Stanley Cup team, it worked out well for that. He knew what that group was and what to stick with and what not to stick with.
And on the flip side, he did that when he traded Paul Stastny, right? That team was in the playoff hunt, and a lot of players got mad at him when he traded Stastny. But he's really good at understanding how high quality a team is and what a team needs to succeed. And again, not that Brayden Schenn is ever going to be an MVP type player, but I think what Brayden Schenn's the only guy on this team that when they need energy at the beginning of the game, he's the only guy that understands there are going to be days where he's going to have to drop the gloves 2 seconds in to energize the team in the building.
Bubs says, which great name, by the way, fantastic name. I need to know, Bubs, if this is like your actual name or nickname, something like that. But Bubs says, with Monty, there's no way they tank. I wonder how they maneuver the salary cap in order to get some better players over the next year or two. So the salary cap going up is very important here because when you're looking at the money that they'll need to give Hofer this offseason, that's a big factor of with Binnington stay or not, because that's been the other argument on the other side is, well, if you keep Binnington, you're spending a lot of money on your goaltenders this offseason.
Right. And that's fine. If your cap is going up and you have This is not an expensive team. You've
Mm-mm.
got so many kids. So if you have goalies that you like, then invest in them, because eventually Jordan Binnington is not going to be here.
Yeah.
So,
Eventually.
yeah. But you know what? We also, how excited were we about Ville Husso a few years ago, right? Everybody thought, oh man, Husso's going to be the man. When we were bummed that he went to Detroit,
Yeah.
and he hasn't wound up being that guy. So sometimes systems benefit a goalie. Sometimes goalies do fool you a little bit. But if the Blues, again, evaluate Joel Hofer, HOFer, as a high quality goalie, I trust their scouting ability. They're pretty good at identifying players.
They're pretty good at that.
Yeah.
What do we have here? Oh, Randy Jacket is tripping me out. Yes. What was the name of
Moyer.
Moyer? Okay, yeah. Word of the day is Moyer, which
So-
is what we're seeing right now with Randy's jacket.
But I'm glad you're tripping out. Spend a Tuesday tripping out. It's kind of fun.
Tripping out with us. And by
Yeah.
the way, too, we should mention before we go into this next segment here with the Grim Report to talk about Pete Rose, of all people,
Mhm.
we have to mention that if there's anything that happens with the Blues this week, going the trade deadline, which is this Friday, that we will be here for instant reaction. We have all the post-game shows that we mentioned, but also any move that the Blues possibly make, we will have instant reaction to that.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find, the Blues were, when they traded Paul Stastny in 2018, they were 34, 26, and 4. And they were within a point of the final wild card spot at that point. But some of the players in that room were really ticked off. But Army said, yeah, he looked at the team and said, we just aren't that good.
Yeah.
And
He evaluated it.
Yep.
Exactly.
And so he'll do the same thing this year. But if he trades Schenn, I will be A, surprised, and B, ticked.
It would have to be the perfect
Yeah,
situation,
and
I feel
Schenner
like.
would have to.
And
obviously.
Schenn has to
Yeah.
agree to that too. Now it's time for the Grim Report. So I don't know if you guys have seen this or not, but it's pretty big news. Manfred is reviewing the bid to reinstate Rose. And you gave us a little, what is this? What is the Grim Report? Is Pete Rose's posthumous? I can never pronounce that correctly. This is too early in the morning for me. Chance at the Hall of Fame still alive. He's not alive.
But is his
Why would you
chance
do
at the Hall of
this?
Fame still alive?
But this is like the wording that you're purposely putting here is
as
just
I
so
wrote
bad.
as I wrote this Chiron, I was like, this is for Randy Karraker. This
I
is
love
this
it.
is
Oh
what
my
this is what
gosh.
working with you for 3 years
We-
has done to me.
We always circle it back to death somehow. I feel
Oh,
like
yeah.
I feel like we always somehow circle it back to death. By the way, Pete Rose is dead as we go into this segment, but Manfred is reviewing a bid to reinstate Pete Rose. So now the question is, should he or should he not? Because if he's reinstating, then of course I assume the next step is to put him in the Hall of Fame. But should they put Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame?
Here's the thing. He would be eligible to be voted upon by the writers. Right now, he's banned. The difference between Pete Rose and the steroid guys is the steroid guys were eligible to be voted upon by the writers. Pete Rose's clock would start, apparently, if he were to be reinstated by Major League Baseball. The writers have changed a lot over the years, and we've had so much debate, and so many people say, yeah, he should be in. So many people say, no way, he shouldn't be in. I would be very intrigued to see if he would get 75% of the vote in
Yeah.
any of the years that he was eligible. And one of the things that he failed to display during the time that he was alive was contrition. He never acted like he was contrite at all about gambling on baseball and then lying about it. He signed baseballs, sold baseballs. It said, I bet on baseball, autographed baseballs.
Yeah, that's kind of like
yeah.
throwing it in their face
Right,
even more
exactly.
a little bit.
So I think people that know the history would probably be inclined to not vote for him, not because of what he did as a player, by the way. He's the all-time hits leader, played in more winning games than anybody else. There are so many positives about Pete Rose, the player. I think it's more about the attitude and the fact that he did
and how
gamble.
he handled it
Yeah,
afterwards.
and that before steroids and after steroids, a lot of people in baseball, players, managers, general managers, they think that gambling on the sport is worse than taking steroids to improve your performance.
It's weird too because we're in a time where gambling is accepted now, but not for the players. Now, Namu and the Lou says Pete Rose is in, PED players out. That's the part that's just so tough because we don't know the full extent of players that were using PEDs.
That's the thing. And I've said this before. It's very rare that players can perform for a long time or get better at an advanced age.
Mhm.
We haven't seen somebody perform the way that Ricky Henderson did until he was 46. We haven't seen pitchers perform the way that, and by the way, Ricky's in the Hall of Fame, the way that Dennis Eckersley, who's in the Hall of Fame, performed until he was 44, 45, 46 years old. We have not seen 38-year-old pitchers throw harder like Randy Johnson did towards the end of his career. We haven't seen players who consistently ripped tendons off of bones like Ken Griffey Jr. did. So you've got to ask, we haven't seen players bulk up that weren't on steroids like Jeff Bagwell and Mike Piazza did. So my guess is, not to say definitively that anybody that I just listed was a PED user. I don't know. We just haven't seen players like them. But I would be surprised if there were all of these Hall of Famers and there wasn't one single guy that used performance enhancers.
So a couple of people coming in on the chat. Steve Barnum says, hey, the stipulation was lifetime ban, just saying.
Good point.
And then this could be Ben. It says Pete Rose shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. He broke the rules. Actions have consequences. And look, I'm kind of in that camp currently right now because of what you said, especially the lying and also the handling of it afterwards by Pete Rose. But also that rule is really clear. I mean, Rule 21 was something that was instituted because of the Black Sox scandal back in 1910. And that was the reason for Rule 21D, where it states that any player, umpire, or club or league official or employee who shall be any sum whatsoever upon bet any sum whatsoever upon any baseball game in connection and with better has a duty to perform shall be declared permanently ineligible. So kind of going back to that lifetime ban, the rule states permanently ineligible.
Yeah,
that's the big
right,
key. So
right.
even permanently, I mean, that means even after death.
Yeah, right. And a lot of this was brought on, A, by his lack of contrition, but B, by the fact that Bud Selig always blamed Pete Rose for Bart Giamatti passing away.
Yeah.
And Bart Giamatti may or may not have had a heart attack, but the pressure placed upon him by the investigation into and the suspension of Rose by the account of Bud Selig played a role. Now, should that play any role in him making it to the Hall of Fame? No. One other point I think that we need to make here is that it's not like Pete Rose's likeness isn't in the Hall of Fame. If you take a walk through the museum in Cooperstown, you'll see a lot of Pete Rose artifacts and stories that tell the story of the game. He just doesn't have a plaque in that shrine in Cooperstown.
So maybe I'm pronouncing this correctly or not. So we could do a compilation of me trying to pronounce people's YouTube names. Tubelo Reb 99 says, well, where did it go?
We've got Nominal in the Lou.
I'm fine with him being banned from the Hall of Fame as a manager, but as a player, he should get in. So to the point that you were just talking about, it's not like he's permanently erased from the history of Major League Baseball. It's not like he's not represented in the Hall of Fame whatsoever. He just doesn't have the plaque.
Right. And there apparently evidence was shed later that he may have been gambling as a player, which would
it's
change
posted all
things.
over in the clubhouses.
Yeah. And I've always said
everywhere.
that. I've always said that if he went to the Hall of Fame, it certainly wasn't going to be as a manager. It was going to be as a player.
Yeah.
But there was later evidence that he may have been gambling as a player as well. And to the point Nominal in the Lou made about the fact that gambling is in every sport now and it's legalized. That's not the point. When he was, and right now, if you're a Major League Baseball player that bets on your team, you're going to get banned. It doesn't matter that gambling is allowed.
That's my thing,
right?
He was not banned for gambling. He was banned for gambling on his team.
Well,
wasn't he?
You can't bet on baseball.
Or your own game.
Yeah.
Yeah, your own game. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, but Jameson Williams was betting on college football and caught an 8-game suspension for it because he did it from the NFL facility.
Yeah.
But and you can't bet on NFL games at all.
Right.
And so anywhere you are. So yeah, you can't, it's not that, no one had a problem with Pete Rose living at the horse track. That wouldn't have been an issue.
And he did.
And he did. Exactly. That wasn't the issue, my man.
He didn't hide it. It's the fact that it was the way that he was betting on teams that he's involved with. That's the issue.
If we've got a Major League team moving to Vegas. If the manager of the Vegas A's bets on baseball and is found to have bet on baseball, even in Vegas where it's completely legal, he would be banned.
No, okay. We got a correction on there. Okay, so Tupelo, correct? Is that the correct way to say it?
Tupelo.
For
It's not-
Tupelo,
Oh, so
Reb
his name is-
99.
I thought it was Tupelo.
I did too. I'm
Tupelo.
so
I
so
like
he's
it.
from Mississippi. Elvis is from Mississippi originally, like where Elvis is
You ever
from.
been to Graceland?
I have not.
Oh, you got to get there.
I have not. I know that's weird that I'm from Tennessee and I never made it over there.
He never even. He didn't.
He's
even
not
have-
there.
Yeah.
So
no.
what am I just gonna see a house?
You go see little tiny
Oh, okay.
televisions.
Have you been there before?
Oh yeah, a couple times.
Is it cool?
It's very cool. Yeah.
The
But
jungle
it's-
room. I would like to see
so-
like that jungle room where he would do like a lot of music.
It's-
Tupelo.
It's surprisingly
Tupelo.
Tupelo. There we go.
Tupelo.
Good.
Thank you for
Uh,
all the corrections. Like
yeah.
I said, we can make a compilation of me trying to pronounce people's. Some of them do confuse you too,
Oh,
right?
yeah,
It's
yeah, no doubt about it, yeah.
I don't want to feel alone.
So one of the surprising things about Graceland is that there's a lot of homes in Frontenac and Ladue that are way bigger than Graceland. It's not.
So it's
huge,
not as big as you think it
right.
would
It
be.
was then in the 50s and
Yeah.
60s, but not now.
It's so interesting. Did you watch that Elvis movie with Austin Butler?
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
He just really did not want to
Nailed it.
leave Memphis
No.
whatsoever. He was afraid of flying,
Mhm.
but it seemed like his manager.
and the
was a
airport
big
was right
reason why.
across the street.
He was afraid of flying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
It's
something.
interesting.
Yeah, I guess who was it? Who was the guy that died in the plane crash? Big Bopper. There you go.
Oh gosh, no, we also mispronounced something else.
Oh, no.
This could be
God.
Ben said. While we're at it, pronouncing so it's More instead of what were we saying? More?
Moyer.
We were saying Moyer.
Somebody was telling me Moyer.
How is
Oopsies.
that
Jamie.
more? Yeah, Buddy Holly.
More.
M-O-I-R-E.
By the way, I don't know why I went with the Big Bopper when Buddy Holly was obviously
Buddy Holly,
the
that's the
bigger
one.
name that died
Yeah.
in the plane crash.
Yeah.
The Big Bopper did die in that plane crash, and Richie Valens.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's
Richie
it.
Valens, Buddy Holly, and the Big Bopper.
Oh,
I don't know
okay.
how I remembered the
So-
name of the
David,
one.
Don McLean song,
Don
American
McLean,
Pie.
right?
Tupelo, right?
Tupelo.
Tupelo
Mississippi.
and More.
Okay,
We're
good.
learning things today. Let's
We're
go, guys.
learning things today. Sorry for not getting it correct earlier. We were saying more.
Moyer.
Moyer, yeah.
We were saying it
So
looks
here-
like it.
here's
To be fair.
my bottom line on Pete Rose. If he were to be reinstated by Major League Baseball and were eligible for the Hall of Fame, that means baseball is saying we're fine with whatever happens with him. If baseball tells me as a voter we're fine with whatever happens, that we think that you need to decide
Mhm.
whether or not he should be a Hall of Famer, I'm voting for him for the Hall of Fame.
Really?
If they're going to put it in my hands and say we aren't going to ban him, it's your job to ban him. I'm going to vote for him.
You're going to vote for him?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
Why is that?
Number one, because he is the all-time hits leader and played in so many winning games and had a 44-game hitting streak and was a great ambassador for the sport. But the other part of it is, if Major League Baseball is saying, okay, well, we will allow him in if you vote for him, then I'm going to vote for him.
All right, great way to look at it.
I guess
Give
so.
you
Yeah.
a chance, you'll take it.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough.
So
what
then
would
how do
guys
you feel about PEDs then?
I think they should all be in.
So every single
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. Here's the thing.
It does feel like I do to the person who put in the chat earlier. It does seem like that the voters that we're talking about specifically with the writers, that they're more inclined to, put in the guys with PEDs rather than
Well, but
gambling.
only certain guys. Like
yeah,
they didn't
certain.
like
It's
Bob.
very
Yeah.
yes. It's a popularity contest.
It is.
Really.
And if you
No.
were stridently against, like if they reported on you and you pushed back on them, like Clemens and Bonds did, then they aren't going to allow you in the Hall of Fame. The writers that vote on the Hall of Fame many times are so self-righteous, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
We saw that with Ichiro.
yeah,
I want to know who that person
The
is.
one is,
I
yeah,
want to know
crazy.
who that person is so bad.
but here's
so
my
bad.
thing about the PED guys is Ken Caminiti, before he passed away, said that more than half of major league players were using PEDs. So what I do is I take it by eras and I say, okay, was he the best of his group? Well, the group was Bonds, Griffey, maybe Sosa, McGuire, Brady Anderson, Luis Gonzalez, Bagwell, all those people that were playing in that era. The ball still went over the fence a lot more for people like Bonds and McGuire and Sosa than it did for the other guys. They were the best of what that playing field was. And because they were the best in the field that they were playing on, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Is it also kind of bad to say that it was probably one of the best things for baseball when you're
awesome.
talking about getting everybody to pay attention to baseball more than any other sport?
Brooke, people still ask me, doing this for 42 years now as a radio, podcast, TV person. And people say, what's your favorite moment? My favorite moment is still the night McGwire hit 61. I can still see it in my mind's eye. The ball going over the fence and the trip around the bases and high-fiving. He almost knocked Dave McKay's hand off with the force of his high five.
That's number
and
one.
And then all the Cubs players coming in, and he's shaking hands with Cubs players as he's walking around the bases. And then Sammy comes in from right field and hugs him. It was just and then after the game, they give him a 62 Corvette, 60-second home run. And they gave him a perfect red 62 Corvette.
That's
it was just
so cool.
an incredible evening.
That's your number one?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I'm just shocked it's not game
But
6.
just think about, that time period, everything that we were talking about with McGwire in person, because watching him on TV, he looked massive. But what was it like just seeing him in person?
He was massive. Yeah. He was big. He
looked like a superhero.
He did. He was a superhero.
Yeah. He just looked unreal.
Yeah. Well, and one time I apologized to him, and I've told the story before, because as you guys know, when I get together with athletes, I ask them how their family is and, talk about things other than their sport, because they like to talk about things.
Exactly.
Everybody
you don't
else
dive into the stats with them or anything.
No. And so they like to generally, just have a regular conversation. And there were times where I would talk to McGwire about like basketball. We'd talk Jordan or talk other stuff. But I 20 years after or more after he had that season, I thought about it, and I treated him like a dog and pony show. I literally didn't ask him. I talked mostly baseball with him, but I didn't ask him about how he was doing. And normally, especially in a situation like that, I'll say, "How you doing?" And I never did, and I apologized to him for that, and he thanked me. But I remember one time, the Jeff Wilkins, the Rams kicker, was going through a horrible stretch. Remember when he started kicking without a shoe?
Yep.
And I would go to him every week and say, "How you doing, man? You all right?" Or if a guy's going through a slump and having a bad time, "Hey, everything all right?" Just, to humanize the guys, because they're human beings. But none of us humanized Mark McGwire that season.
No.
And so the pressure was enormous. And that's part of what made it cool, because he was able to withstand that pressure.
It's so weird that you say Jeff Wilkins now, and one of the first things I think about is him talking about how he didn't like the nickname.
Money?
He didn't like, he hated the nickname. And I have to wonder if maybe like you said, he starts kicking without a shoe, a guy who just kind of had some issues kind of about self-esteem and stuff like that. And so he hated that nickname. That always fascinated me about Wilkins.
And I remember one time talking to him, and Mike Martz ripped him, because Mike Martz did that. If a player was going bad, he'd rip him. And his daughters were like 6 and 8 at the time. And he said, this morning at breakfast, my daughter asks, "Daddy, are we still going to be here?"
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Ripped my heart out of my chest.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine,
Dear
especially
God.
in this day and age too, with social media, how, you see what family members say that, the messages that they get from fans.
Right. Yeah.
I can't imagine how you can completely shield your family and children from what you see on social media, what people are saying.
You can't. And that's why I think it's from our perspective, I'm a fan with access, but I also want to make life better with what I do for everybody, not just athletes, but for everybody. And so hopefully in some small way, and not that I did it for McGwire, but and I think that's kind of one of the reasons that players, after I've covered them for a long time, like me.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just about, "Hey, what'd you see on that 3-2 pitch?" And
you also didn't go run and then tell that information, because it's another part, because some players are kind of weary just behind the scenes, especially when you go in the clubhouse and locker room. Some of them are wary of even telling you too much, because then they're worried that you're going to go and take that on social media. Like, oh, well, if they told you I'm not having a great day because this or this happened with a family, they're worried that you will go take that on social media and run with it and say, oh, well, they might not be playing well today because they have this going on in their personal life, which some reporters sadly do.
Hey,
and
Brooke.
I said do twice, but but some players do. Some reporters do that.
They do.
There's no way to avoid
Stop
that.
saying it. Just say the day. Some reporters do that.
I
Do you
had
ever need both?
one of the area's team doctor come to me one time, and said, "What do you think of a certain person in the media?" And I said, "Well, he's kind of
I know this story.
kind of a self promoter, kind
Yeah.
of, it's he goes for it. He's really hardworking." And he said, "Well, in our industry, nobody trusts him."
Mm.
And I said, "Well, interesting, because not surprising." But he said, "Yeah, we don't even talk to him anymore because we don't trust him." I said, "What do you guys think of me?" He said, "Oh, we all trust you. We think you're awesome. We think you're great."
But that's
Yeah.
because you don't
Did you
run
believe
to
that?
social
Yeah,
media
that's why I brought
for
that up,
to be the first to report something.
Yeah.
This could be Ben said. Those reporters that are doo-doo. It's very true.
Yeah.
I agree with that,
Yeah.
and it's honestly
wrong.
this is a bigger discussion for another day, not
Yeah.
on a sports podcast.
Yeah,
But
if we're going to discuss doo-doo, we need to give it
Oh,
more
no,
time.
I'm
No.
saying in general, there's such a distrust of media, and it's because of reporters like that
Yep.
that just kind of care about the story more than the person.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the newsletter, guys.
Yeah, let's talk about the
You
newsletter.
can stay on top of St.
You
Louis
you
sports.
too can do the newsletter.
Yeah, and here's the cool thing about it: it's free. So all you need to do is sign up, log on to sportshubstl.com, and sign up for our newsletter. And you can get all kinds of great articles. You can get all kinds of great information about what's going on the St. Louis sports scene, and of course at sportshubstl.com, and here on our YouTube channel at Sports Hub STL. We want you to be fully invested. We want you to be our partner on Sports Hub STL. And one of the best ways to do that is to sign up for the newsletter. Each Monday and Thursday it comes out. Just log on to sportshubstl.com and sign up today and get it in your inbox twice a week.
Nice. Now we have our overarching to close out the show. So any questions, comments, concerns, please don't ask us to pronounce things that we have
Doo-doo.
never tried pronouncing before, like more a.
Mhm.
Oh,
We learned
that's
that today.
fun,
That was the word of the day.
man.
So
Yeah.
now we actually know what to say.
Yeah, and
It's a more.
this is evidently the last time I wear this pullover.
Apparently.
Yeah, it really it looks.
I love it.
It looks so
You see, to
crazy
us,
on
we
the
have like a
YouTube
TV
chat.
in
It-
here, and it
it's-
looks normal.
Does,
No,
does
but
it look blue and white or black and blue?
no, it's
it's
just
not-
moving.
yeah,
It
no,
looks like it's
oh.
moving.
Yeah, it's kind of like your well, it's like the stories I've heard about certain illicit materials that you can consume, and then that stuff like
Oh.
happens. Like I've heard
Mushrooms?
stories. Yeah, I've heard stories that it can do that apparently.
Okay.
Friends.
so-
Yeah,
You've
friends have
heard
told me these kind of things
friends
before.
have said
We
these
have a
things
couple. We
before.
have a couple chats sitting that
Let
we
me-
have not
let
been able
me-
to get into
oh,
yet.
Let me get to this first, though, because for our overarching segment, I want to talk about what's going on in Houston. Joe Espada, the manager of the Astros, said to the Houston Chronicle that he's going to play Jose Altuve almost exclusively in left field. He said, quote, "Right now the plan is for him to play the majority of his games in left field," adding that moving Altuve, quote, "back and forth is something that I am going to avoid." I wonder what their thought process is. They have a guy named Mauricio Dubon
Mhm.
playing second, who was an outfielder throughout his career until they moved him to the infield. And now they're moving an infielder to the outfield. I just have to wonder, Brooke and Matthew, if there's something else afoot here. This does not seem like a typical sensible move to play Altuve in left. Altuve did say, "Hey, I'll move to left if we can keep Bregman here." Well, they didn't keep Bregman there. So why is Altuve being moved to left field?
Maybe they're just making sure that things are ready for a certain somebody to come.
Itzhak Paredes, their third baseman, can move over and play second base.
That seems like they could set things up for Nolan Arenado,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
he already denied wanting to go there. He shut that down basically. So then what changes? What do you think has changed where he would want to go there?
Well, they're definitely going to have a better chance to win with that rotation.
With Walker
with
coming
Christian
in,
Walker, with Paredes, with Yordan Alvarez.
Altuve now
The-
that you
yep.
have him moved.
You've got Josh Hader at the back end of the bullpen. They've got a lot of nice elements in Houston and a division. Seattle's not going to be hard to beat. The Angels aren't going to be hard to beat. The A's aren't going to be hard to beat. So it's the Rangers and the Astros. One of those two is going to win the division.
Better playoff chances than the Cardinals, I would say.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things that I think that would be attractive is that Nolan Arenado says he wants to win. And the other part of it would be that he can walk in there, and Alvarez is the number one guy, and Walker is a really good player. It seemed like when they traded Tucker that he was worried about the weight of the offense resting on his shoulders. But with the addition of Christian Walker, I
Mhm.
don't know that is necessarily the case.
It
anymore.
changes a lot.
Yeah.
And Walker is obviously fantastic. So that would make things a lot
He's
more appealing.
As good at first base as Paul Goldschmidt
Yeah.
ever was. He's a Gold Glover.
Yeah. So that's something to watch. I don't know. I think that is intriguing. When I saw that move with Altuve, it made me can we stop with I was trying to compose a thought here and now I'm distracted.
I'm such a child.
Yes,
but
you
thank
are.
you so much to the
Yes.
YouTube chat for playing into it. I think it's
No.
important. I think we need to address Hunter's query.
Yeah.
Maybe Jose's defense at second has just gone doo-doo.
Doo-doo. Yes. Maybe it has.
Well, I don't know that it's going to be any worse than Dubon's. I mean, you can, even though we don't have the shift anymore, you can still kind of hide a second baseman, especially a guy that's played as much as he has at second base.
And they did sign a former Rocky second baseman, Brendan Rodgers, who is a defensive specialist of a sort at second base. So they can make it work. But did you mention? I was going through the chat. Did you mention the aspect of what will have to happen for cutoffs if Altuve's out in left field?
So
this is insane. This is like the Cardinals trying to put an injured player out in right field one time.
Well, or when they played, remember when they told Albert Pujols not to play or not to throw in his rookie year?
Yep.
But they're going to have Jeremy Pena, their shortstop. He's going to have to run out like 20 or 30 yards farther because Altuve's arm is tough. So the cutoff man is going to have to run out to left field a lot further.
That does sound a little rough, by the way.
Justin on the chat says teams need to leave Arenado alone. He is focused on St. Louis. I really am tired of all the trade talks. Well, the reality of the situation is
it's never gone away.
Yeah, he is. The Cardinals said during the offseason that priority 1, 2, and 3 was to trade Nolan Arenado, and Arenado admitted that he wanted to go somewhere where he could win. So even though right now nothing is happening, and that's what they're saying, they aren't saying they aren't going to trade him. They're saying nothing is happening right now. So there is still, until there's going to be smoke here.
Exactly.
And finally, dream scenario is Nolan gets back to MVP form and we flip him at the deadline for a big-time prospect. Worst case, we get to hold on to a future Hall of Famer longer.
Yeah.
For another couple of years.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just a little bit longer.
Reminds me of when Matheny had Grichuk in center field with Jason Hayward as the relay man. 100% Little League stuff. Yeah.
That is one of the greatest pieces of on-field comedy I've ever seen in my baseball watching life. Everyone likes to think about Marcell Ozuna climbing the wall when he didn't have to. Hilarious, no doubt about that. But the time of the Cardinals were like, no, you just have to relay it to the center fielder or to the right fielder, and then he'll relay it in.
His arm is good enough.
Just the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. I loved everything about it. It was perfect.
It was great.
I want to touch on one.
We do have to close this out, though, because I got to go.
Yes,
I have a doctor's appointment that I got to get to. Sorry, just a little behind the scenes.
So are we done?
Yeah.
Okay, Colton Wong playing outfield was great too. Yeah, so was Alan Craig.
Yeah.
Great job today by our producer, audio, video engineer, Matthew Rocchio. Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
And Brooke is headed to the doctor. Don't speed.
Okay.
I'll
try not to.
Did you have fun?
Yes.
All right. Good to be back. I'm going to get a good night's sleep tonight, maybe. I'm legendary with sleep apnea. I just want you to know that. Until tomorrow, from everybody here at Sports Hub STL and the Randy Karraker Show, have a terrific Tuesday, St. Louis and everybody else.